I am very excited to share today that this is the first episode of my collaboration with guests to create shrines for our shrine project. Today's episode is with Ryan from Eyes on the Moon Studio. If you would like to see his full interview, go ahead and check out episode 66. The shrine that we come up with today is called the Altar of Amalgamation. And if you would like to get the full text write-up of this altar, then go ahead and check it out on the Patreon, and I will leave links in the show notes. I'm also open to interpretation or suggestions on how some of the shrine mechanics and boons might work. So if you are interested in brainstorming some of that, please feel free to leave a comment either on YouTube or on the Discord server about how you would maybe handle some of the mechanical benefits of this shrine. As far as starting with the shrine, do you want to roll on like random tables, or do you have something that's kind of coming to mind?
I work best by being asked questions. So if you want to direct it via question and I kind of move off of that, I think that could be fun too.
So I think the first question that I want to ask is, where might you find this shrine? Like, think of an area, dungeon, jungle, some type of a biome maybe. Where do we want to set this shrine?
I see, just off the top of my head, I see this shrine tucked in an alcove almost at first you think it's a snow dune that has just been blown to look like it's hanging over, but really it's just part of an outcropping of rock that has grown up and out of the ground that has just been covered by snow.
And what would kind of be the feelings like as an adventurer or a visitor is kind of approaching this area? What feelings would they get as they get closer?
I would feel that there is a sense of a regality, a sense of a deep purpose and meaning, but it is one that they are not familiar with because it comes from a people that are no longer there. But the reverence that these people had for this place is so powerful and so old that it pervades them even though they do not understand it.
So let's talk a little bit about this ancient people. Is this people something that like an average person would like kind of know about, maybe from tales or legends?
I think it could be interesting if these people were a a sort of cautionary tale to children that no one thought was real, but they are. Or they
So
were, and now they're gone.
sure, okay. And what would this cautionary tale be about or warning children of?
So these people, and this is all just top of my head. So if this doesn't work for you, then just, don't be afraid to tell me. So these people worshipped this idea, a sense of oneness, a sense of total and complete unity, so much so that they sought to sort of combine themselves into a collective in the hopes that it would increase the potential for knowledge and for growth. But what they didn't realize was that combining that collection of their consciousness and their souls made them forget that the reason that you strive for a goal and the reason that you strive for advancement is because you as an individual want to succeed. So it's a way for parents to warn their children against going too much with the tide of what others think and believe. You should learn to think and believe for yourself so that you're not swept up in a sea of people that don't even know who they are anymore.
Okay. I like where this is going, and I'm starting to kind of form ideas of maybe what some mechanics might look like. So they're a cautionary tale. They became almost too similar or too collective. What happened to them? Like, did they lose their individuality, or what happened to this people that were?
Just top of my head, I would say that eventually it got to the point where enough of them had joined this collective that those that had wanted to break free from it were already gone. And those that were a part of it felt no need to try and reach out and bring others because there was no need. They were already all a part of this collective. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it sounds like kind of their downfall would be that they just didn't, they almost stopped growing in a way and they just would have kind of died off eventually.
In a way, it's like the downfall is they got what they wanted, but they didn't realize that what they wanted would mean that they would no longer progress.
So kind of a twist of fate or a an irony in that in their attempt to advance, they actually hindered their own growth.
Yeah. So it's like if you have a goal of, say, getting stronger by going to the gym, that doesn't have to stop. But if you have a goal of like, well, I want to go and I want to lift 50 pounds with my bench press just for a number, and you get to the 50 pounds, you could just as easily be like, okay, I did it, and then just not do anything else. I did my goal. I did it. I won. So the problem with this collective was they got to a point where everyone that was in this collective was a part of it, and those that had left were gone. So to those that were already a part of it, it just became, okay, we did it. We we have found our goal. Our purpose has been achieved. There is no desire to do anything else because we did it. And because there was no individuality to try to push for a new goal, that's just where it stayed.
Sure. And so kind of entering into this shrine or temple, what would a visitor notice, kind of like a physical description of what they would see?
I see because the outcropping I imagine is growing up, not growing out of the ground. I almost see it as if it was pushed out of the ground from being buried underground for so long. So when they enter in, everything is like slanted and on an angle and nothing is right, but all the walls are uniform and pristine and there is no curvature to the place. It's all straight lines and hard angles.
And is there any particular scents or anything that they would get being in here? Smells?
In this case, because it had been buried underground for so long, you're probably going to get just a mustiness, kind of like a mildew now that it's interacting with fresh air, especially from like melting snow that would have been trapped inside.
And this being what is the like material that this place is made out of? Is it stone? Is it ice?
I see it in a way almost like a sort of material that is not familiar to people that are currently engaged in the world because these people were lost so long ago. You could even have it be it's like a metallic sort of material that does not show any signs of where it begins or where it ends. Like there's no way that a natural blacksmith of this current age could have made this.
Okay, so there's something both unfamiliar and potentially magical, I suppose, about at least the construction methods for building such a place.
It would seem magical because to the people that like if an adventuring group showed up there and looked at it, they wouldn't have an explanation of how it was done. So it must have been magic because we don't know how this happened.
So it would seem magical. Is it in reality? So, like in a fantasy game, when certain characters can detect magic, would they actually have any sort of an arcane mark on them or residue or something?
I would say that they would probably give off a decent amount of transmutation magic, having everything needed to have been like molded together, transmuted together.
Are there any prominent like things in the altar, like either places to sit or an altar of some kind or statues?
I see statues that are humanoid in shape but purposely genderless and featureless, very uniform.
Going back to that sameness that you talked about.
Right. And everything in that place is precisely measured out and it's exactly equal. So, like, one statue is completely equidistant to the next one, and the same thing to the next one, and stuff like that.
So, what is the shape of the kind of the shrine that we're in?
If you were to look at it from a high vantage point, it'd be very geometric, you know?
So, would we say that it's? You mentioned, I guess, no curves. So, would you say like square or at least some type of a equal distant sided what polygon or whatever?
I think it could be a square. I think if you zoomed out far enough, you would see it is a big square, but if you got closer, you'd see various hallway, almost like veins of just smaller hallways and chambers that are bigger and or smaller squares and rectangles.
And so we talked about the kind of metallic material. What color and what would that feel like to people if they touched it?
I would see it being a very pale green color, I think would be interesting. And then to touch it would feel like a strange, comforting warmth. Like you would want to touch it. You would want to be more in tune with this. And then I even see a bunch of chairs lining several of these hallways, and some of the chairs are empty. And the reason they're empty is because if you sit in one of those chairs and you're there long enough, you become part of the temple, and that's how you become a part of that collective.
Ah, so sitting in the chairs in a way like transforms you just so I'm thinking of like Pirates of the Caribbean, the ship, Davy Jones's ship,
Kind of, yeah.
where they all just kind of slowly become part of the ship. So given that, are there places in the temple that are noticeable where other people may have been absorbed into the temple, I guess, for lack of a better word?
I would say that because most of the temple is still underground, if the heroes went deeper, they might even find places where the people that were sitting in those chairs had not finished that process, and part of them was metallic and part of them was dead and, hanging outside of those metallic changes.
You could almost see this as like a alternate to like a Medusa layer or something too, where you have like people who they've eventually kind of turned into this metallic material, but they're in kind of like a pose of like crawling or standing or something.
You could do that just to like kind of show the difference between what happens if you sit there for too long and what happens if you can't get away.
Right. And so potentially there's an area in the shrine where there'll be like a statue and the statue will be sitting on a bench, right? And like sometimes you like take pictures with them or whatever the case is. I can almost see like certain areas of at first people maybe think, "Oh, these are just like those, people they made statues and they put them on benches and they just kind of populated them around the shrine, but actually kind of coming to that realization that those were people at one point."
Yeah, I think it's interesting.
So, as far as kind of chambers inside of this shrine or this temple, we've got some hallways, we've got some seating. Is there any other like big rooms in this place?
I would see, because there would have to be chambers for people that were not ready yet to make that final, decision. And I would have to imagine there would be a chamber in the center that would somehow be the purpose for this collective. Sort of like how a mind flayer layer will have a place for the elder brain, but this would almost be, in my mind, a sort of constantly shifting 3D geometric shape that just does not stop in its revolutions and its movement.
I like that. So, I imagine this would almost be kind of like you said, at the center of kind of at like the heart of this shrine.
Yeah, it would be at the very center.
And would it be, I'm imagining some just weird, like giant rotating, like you said, kind of square, kind of angled chunk of almost like metal, I guess, kind of the same material.
Yeah, and it would look, and it's not like it's moving in a way to where it's moving around itself, almost as if it's condensing and pulling out and just changing shape constantly.
And what would like if somebody went and viewed this, like what kind of emotions or feelings would they have kind of being in the same room as this thing?
And this is where maybe my mind gets a little dark, but they would feel a sense of welcoming. They would feel a sense of wanting to embrace this. This is a place where you can leave your cares behind. You can come to a place that will accept you and support you, and you can be a part of it and leave all that shit behind. All the stuff you bring with you, all that is negativity, all that pain and suffering that you feel, it's because you're alone. You could join all these people and they would support you and they would take care of you. But what they don't understand is when you let go of your individuality, you're not you anymore. You're a part of this thing. But in the moment, it feels welcoming. They should want to do that. They should have to fight against that feeling.
I like that. I think that maybe leads us into some mechanics for this place because this really feels like a place of comfort and wholeness and rest. But then there's also this like you have to get out before it's too late feeling. So if we want to look at mechanics for something that the players could do, do you feel like this is something where the players could interact with the place to get some sort of a benefit, or maybe they kind of get an innate benefit from being in there and then actually the mechanics is to just try to get away from it? What are you thinking?
I feel like the entrance to this place should make them feel better. Like when they step inside, they're not cold anymore. Or when they step inside, they might slowly begin to have their wounds heal, or maybe they slowly start to get back things that they lost or things like that. You know what I mean?
Right, like it's a rejuvenating place.
Right. They should naturally want to be inclined to move deeper within.
Okay. And now I'm trying to think of what. So I feel like going into the shrine, going in, going deeper, they're not going to have any problems with that, right? Because that's just something that they're going to want to do, and be pulled to
Yeah.
do. I feel like it's when they turn and they decide that they're trying to leave
Mm-hmm.
that's when maybe some sort of a role mechanic would come into play. I'm trying to think of a way to handle this so that and maybe this is fine. Maybe we have a shrine that can just kill your players if they stay too long. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if the players are into that kind of game and they are aware that these things can happen, then I think there's nothing wrong with designing a place that lives up to that promise.
I like it. So so if the players are trying to leave, what do you think they would need to like fight against, or I guess in like D&D terms, like what kind of a save or something would they need to make to break through this to get out?
I mean, the first answer that comes to mind is wisdom save, but I feel like those are done so much, you know. I
Mm,
almost want it to be a check based on they used to call them will saves, but I guess those are basically just wisdom saves in 5e.
yeah, I suppose that could it kind of depends on what part of your will you mean, because I mean, I feel like you could go intelligence, wisdom, or maybe even charisma, depending on what you're like how you're feeling you would be
I actually
tempted.
think yeah, I actually think maybe it would be interesting if the more of your allies are around you, the harder it is for you to succeed on this check.
Oh, I okay, that's interesting.
You know, like
I like that idea.
the more minds that are like in close proximity, the more this temple will make them feel like you can join us. You can all join us. We could all be together. It's the idea of breaking apart and being an individual that will help you to be free from it.
We didn't talk about it, but is there only one entrance or are there multiple entrances?
I would say that there could be multiple, but because it's like jutting out of the ground, there's only the one. And I think because the heroes would come across it in a place that is naturally inhospitable, it would lead them to want to get inside to get away from like a blizzard or something like that.
Sure. So I'm trying to kind of like solve this puzzle of like if this showed up in your world and it is potentially a deadly encounter despite there not being any, enemies or anything in there, how could you potentially get out of here? And I think maybe one of the solutions would be either everybody kind of goes a separate direction and leaves it through a different exit at the same time so their rolls would be easier. Or so I guess then the next question is when would they need to roll? Is it when they're leaving the shrine and going from the shrine to outside, or is it just like when they try to split up as a group, even within the shrine, where does that where does that magic kind of block them?
I think it would be kind of interesting to where anytime, and you'd need a big map to do it, but anytime they got to one of the crossways or they had to make a turn somewhere, they would need to start rolling, and the DC would be pretty low in the beginning, depending on how many people were there. But you'd need to start rolling to see if you were more so pulled to go deeper in, or if you were allowed to, well, not allowed, but you would be more inclined to want to go back. And what that'll do is it'll also bring out and it'll be playing with metagaming, but if you start making them roll and like you want to go deeper in, they're going to want to try to get out naturally. But if the rolls are, going like how they're going, they're going to be going in. You know what I mean?
I feel like we could do so since I don't have like maps or anything included with these, kind of like that chanting monks shrine, having like almost a kind of an abstracted visual or stat that kind of indicates how deep they are into this place, right? So I could kind of see this as like you you have some number, I don't know what we'll call it, but almost it's like progress towards the center of the shrine, right? And so like when you enter in, you set it to 0. You're just on like the outskirts of the shrine. When you move around in the shrine, you basically make a roll, and the roll would be structured as when you move around, you roll plus whatever your progress or whatever is, right? So if you're on the outside of the shrine, you're not going to have a big bonus to it. And then if you essentially kind of quote unquote succeed, it's almost like backwards. If you roll high, you feel the pull and you venture farther in. So then you would add progress to that, and
Hmm.
so that number is going to kind of keep going up the deeper you get, right? And then maybe to encapsulate the people or like being in a group part of it, then you just say if you're with other people, you just make that roll. Actually, you would make it at advantage. So
Hmm.
you'd make the roll, and it would pull you deeper in, essentially. And
Yeah.
then to get out, you just have to kinda, like, walk that progress back.
Hmm.
Seems like it
Yep.
could be very deadly, though.
Oh
Very
yeah, and that's the thing is like that's why these people all failed. You know, they couldn't get out. They lost. And I think the biggest thing that would help the players to realize that this might not be ideal is kind of like you described. You start showing the deeper they go in. Some of these people are like mostly metallic, but they're trying to crawl to get away and they couldn't make it, or their bodies are just hanging out of these things and they just didn't get out.
Yeah, almost like each and I have notes on some of them, but just to say, like, each level that you get deeper, you grind more and more of that, like the first level, maybe there isn't people trying to escape and it just feels good and whatever. And then like in the second layer, there's the people are like frozen to chairs and stuff. And then in like the third layer, it's like people are trying to get out, you
Hmm.
know. And then like as you get deeper and deeper, it gets scarier and scarier as to kind of what you're describing is inhabiting those areas. So then yeah, the solution here would be basically split the party, and then try to get out by yourself. I like it. This would be the deadliest shrine that we've designed so far. I have not done anything too terribly cursed, but this is definitely the one.
Well, sweet.
Cool. So, is there anything else you want to talk about or say about this shrine?
No, I think that's about it. I kind of like leaving it a bit more open so that people could do things with it on their own if they wanted to change it to fit their worlds and such.
What would you name this shrine or temple?
Question. I'm really big about titles too. Shit, let me think.
Take your time.
I'm trying to find a I'm trying to find a word that's not exactly like union, but is something similar. I'm thinking the altar of amalgamation.
I gotta look up the actual definition of that. Okay, so amalgamation is the action process, a result of combining or uniting.
To mix or merge so as to make a combination, blend, unite, combine, specifically in metallurgy, to mix or alloy with mercury. So you could even have it to be where it's more silver than green, and that's why it looks all liquid metally, is because it's all been amalgamated together. And that's why that thing,
Sure.
oh, the floaty fucking thing could look more liquid than like anything else. It's just this continually changing liquid metallic shape.
Almost like a yeah. So thinking of like like watching Mercury roll around
Yeah.
is really weird and satisfying. But some sort of a shape like that, even if it's still like sharp angles and stuff, but like that fluidity of it.
Maybe, ooh, if they get there, they're probably going to be dead anyway. But maybe if they get to that point and they see that shape, all that they see in that shape is whatever is most welcoming and like most convincing to them to become part of it.
So here's another question: if they make it to the center, so maybe it's like 5 layers deep or something. Let's say they make it there, but then they are managed to get out alive. Do they get some sort of a benefit for making it to the middle, essentially?
And then getting out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say there could be a mechanic to where they would be able to work more closely with their allies. Like they could give each other bonuses in combat or something like that. Or maybe even like a just a natural telepathy between all of them to where they were so close that they were able to just read each other's minds.
I like that. Yeah, just that the unity, that teamwork idea. And so with these shrines and stuff, since I'm not specifically making them for 5e, it's kind
Mhm.
of like general system agnostic roughly. I want to try to leave it open-ended a little bit so I can maybe just put a note in there to say like here's some options that you could potentially award your players with depending on whatever makes sense in the system that you're in. But like the telepathy or like some sort of a advantage mechanic when you're working with your allies or something would make sense.
Oh yeah.
I like it. Cool. Well, Ryan, this has been great, and this was a lot of fun putting together this altar with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a blast.
Tucked away in an alcove is the entrance to the altar of amalgamation. The entrance is built from an unfamiliar metal with a pale green tint. The architecture uses hard angles and geometric shapes. Venturing inside is comforting from the outside elements. This space emanates a sense of regality and deep purpose. The walls are made of the same pale green metal. Closer inspection reveals the entire temple to be built or molded from a single piece of this metal. There are no seams or noticeable markings of construction. Benches, chairs, and other objects around the temple are connected as a single piece. The metal is comforting and warm to the touch. Along the walls are carvings of text and imagery depicting the collective of people who founded this place, constructing it with a sense of oneness and total unity. Individuality was left behind for the wholeness of the collective. A diagram shows that there are 5 intersections of the temple, with the altar of amalgamation at its center. Reaching the center and meditating at the altar is said to bring enlightenment. And then we have a quick note to the game master. While not inherently malicious, venturing into the temple is dangerous, as it attempts to prevent you from leaving, which we will get to here in just a second. All right, so for the mechanics, we have things structured a little bit secretively here to maybe change how the players interpret this. So I probably, as a GM, wouldn't tell them everything about the rules right away. I would just have them kind of go along until they trigger the roll. So you'll see what I mean here in a second. When you set out to enter the innermost sections of the temple, set your progress to 0. When you move to the next intersection, increase your progress by 1. The GM will tell you what you see. You may stay at this section, move to the next intersection, or move to an outer section. And then here's where the kind of complication comes in. When you attempt to move to an outer section, the altar calls you closer. Roll 1d20 plus progress. If you are near your friends, roll with advantage. And this is kind of a backwards roll here. So on a 20 plus, you're called closer and you move to the next intersection. So you're getting pulled farther and farther into the altar of the temple. On a 15 to 19, you stay where you are, enjoying the comfort of the temple. So you're not actually able to move out, but you don't go farther in. And then a 14 minus, you move to an outer section and reduce your progress by 1. So there's a chance that the players kind of permanently get stuck in here. So let's go to these section descriptions that they will see as they get deeper and deeper into the temple. Section 1, simple benches and sitting areas for prayers. So pretty basic, not a whole lot going on. In Section 2, there are some featureless humanoid statues made of that same green metal that are either sitting or standing in prayer. At Section 3, these same statues, the statues in this section are a little bit different. They have more active poses, so some are in pairs, as if conversing, others are sitting and holding books, etc. Section 4 is where things start to get a little weird. Some of the statues are in poses that seem less comforting. Some are crawling towards an exit. Others look as though they are struggling to move. And then Section 5 is the altar of amalgamation. A mass of this pale green metal floats and shifts in the middle of the room. Think of mercury or some other type of liquid metal. So this is metallic, but like liquid, it shifts between different geometrical shapes and patterns. The altar is extremely comforting and you feel whole here. When you gaze upon the altar of amalgamation with others, you are bonded. your abilities to work together increase. And when you work together, you act as one being. So there's a note here for the game master. The game master can determine how this effect plays out at the table, granting some type of bonus or advantage when players are helping each other out because of this experience that they've had. Now, the other thing to note here is that essentially what is happening is that people who stay in this temple for too long become one with the temple. Hence, the statues were once living people who either willingly or unwillingly merged with the temple itself, and the whole temple is trying to become one being. And that goes along with the theme of the metal, and everything is molded together, everything is one piece. So, this is the altar of amalgamation. You can get the text version of this on the Patreon, and I will share a link to that in the show notes. And if you have some suggestions on how these mechanics play out, please feel free to leave a comment. This one was a little bit more difficult to put together, and I'm not sure about how potentially deadly this is without really being deadly at the same time. So I'm curious what people's thoughts are on this. And then I will see you guys in the next episode.